Next, the next speaker is Francesco Carotenuto.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, and he'll be talking about Maxi J1348 minus 8630. There were a lot of questions yesterday. I'm pretty sure he'll be answering all of them today. Take it away.
Okay, so hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity. I am Francesco Carotenuto, PhD student with Stéphane Corbel at the Université de Paris. And today I would like to present results on the relativistic jets, mostly discrete ejecta, that we observed in the new macroquasar Maxi J1348. So this source was discovered 2 years ago in two outbursts, and so far it's performed a main outburst followed by 7 shorter brightenings, and is currently in quiescence. What we know is that it's classified as a black hole candidate, and we have an indication on its distance, but we don't have other information on the parameters of the system, such as the mass or the spin of the black hole. On our side, we monitor the whole outburst in radio and X-rays as part of a Thundercat collaboration, which is the large survey project dedicated to radio transients for the Mercat radio interferometer. So we have more than 50 Mercat observations at 1.3 gigahertz, and these are taken roughly with a weekly cadence. So this is the backbone of our monitoring. Then we have additional radio coverage in radio with ATCA at higher frequency, and then a good coverage in the X-rays with Swift and Maxi. So here you can see the light curves that were shown before also by Tom. This is the complete light curve. So we have on top the X-ray light curve, below the radio light curve, and on the bottom the spectral index. In this plot, we also color code the spectral state. So in white, we have the phases of hard state, in gray, the intermediate state, and in pink, the soft state. You can see in the top plot, in the X-rays, that the outburst started very quickly with a quick rise, then a first state transition from the hard to the soft state, a smooth decay in the soft state, then a transition back to the hard state, and then a complex sequence of reflares and rebrightenings without any additional state transition. In radio, we see a strong radio flare at the first state transition, peaking to alpha Jansky, which is likely associated to discrete ejecta that I will show after, and then a phase of non-detection of the radio emission, then a reactivation of the radio emission that in the second hard state tracks the X-ray emission for the rest of the outburst. So what's important here is that in a hard state, the radio emission at the core location is produced by compact jets that we detected and follow throughout the whole outburst. But what I want to focus on in this talk are actually the discrete ejecta that we resolved in this for this black hole. And I will show here now a selection of Mercat images that were also shown in the talk before, starting just after the strong radio flare here in a soft state. So these are a sequence of Mercat images taken roughly with a weekly cadence. We actually mark in purple the core location, and you can see that at the beginning we have a sort of residual radio emission from the flare, but then we start to resolve an additional component that we mark here as a red cross, and that appears to travel very fast in a northeast direction, up to reaching 10 seconds in a few weeks. We also have a second discrete ejecta, which we mark here as a blue cross that also goes in the same direction. So this is important because it's not that common to be able to resolve discrete ejecta in black hole X-ray binaries, but Mercat is really improving the situation, and these are the third and the fourth discrete ejecta resolved in the recent years, and more are coming from Mercat. And so actually these ejecta are thought to be bipolar, but here we don't see any counterjet. We only see 2 single-threaded ejecta going in the same direction, and I will show later maybe a reason for that. And so actually, in this talk, I will only focus on the first discrete ejecta, the one marked with a red cross, because we obtain more detection of it. And eventually, this first component was also detected several months later, 6 months later, the first selection of images, while it rebrightened and actually appeared to be detected again at large scale. Here we are at 27 arcseconds from the core, and was appearing to be strongly decelerated, like moving extremely slowly this part, probably due to the interaction at large scale with ISM. So, but to study what's happening to this ejecta, we have to plot its proper motion. And here we actually plot the angular separation of this ejecta with respect to the core location as a function of time. You can see a first phase in which this jet is moving with a high and constant speed. Then a phase of non-detection in the middle, and then this ejecta reappeared, it was detected and appeared to be strongly decelerated. So we remark here that this deceleration phase is one with the best coverage in radio that we have so far, and this thanks to the sensitivity and to the monitoring strategy of Mercat. But what's interesting in this plot is actually the deceleration phase itself, because this appears to be rather abrupt and rather strong if we take here a straight line, possibly hinting to the fact that the jet was traveling and then hit something on its way, encountered an obstacle, and was strongly decelerated by it. So this reminded us that this source might be consistent with a scenario proposed some years ago by Howe et al. In 2009, so that this kind of black holes might be living in low-density ISM cavities, empty bubbles produced by the system itself, possibly from the action of winds from the accretion disk or from the jet itself. And in this context, we might have that the system is harbored in this low-density ISM cavity. The jet is first traveling with a constant speed, radiating as it adiabatically expanded, then going undetected below our detection threshold, and then hitting the wall of this cavity at 27 Arc seconds, 25 Arc seconds, rebrightening and decelerating due to the interaction with a higher density ISM in this case. So then to understand more of the physics of these jets, and also to test this hypothesis, we decided to model the whole motion of this jet. And this is a work now done in collaboration with Alex Titarenko, where we decided to apply a full physical model, a full dynamical model to the jet motion. And these models consider a plasma which is adiabatically expanding and traveling in the ISM. So since the expansion is adiabatic, we can neglect radiation losses, and it is encountering material on its way, and it's transferring its kinetic energy to the swept up material through external shocks, in analogy with afterglows from GRBs. The jet will also model it to be traveling in these low-density ISM cavities, which assume to be spherical, and outside we assume a standard ISM density of 1 particle per cubic centimeter, while inside we assume a density of n ISM over delta. So delta is our density jump. Actually depends on many parameters of the jet itself and on the environment of the system. And for details on model and the equations, you can look at the papers by Steiner et al. So we fit this model to our data with a Bayesian approach using Monte Carlo Markov chain, and here you can see the results. Actually, you have our best fit line with uncertainty in orange. You can see how the model adapts well to our data, and actually it seems to be really consistent with what we observe. In the first phase, the jet is traveling with a mildly relativistic speed, then hits the wall of the cavity at 25 Arc seconds, here we mark it as a blue line, and then decelerates, reaching a set of evolutionary phase after it swept up enough material on its path. But since this is actually a Bayesian fit, then we have the posterior distributions for all the parameters of the jet. And here I show some results. You can see here the posteriors. We can, for example, infer the jet had an initial Lorentz factor of around 1.8, which is mildly relativistic and broadly consistent with what has been observed for other sources. The motion is consistent with an inclination angle of the jet axis, of around 30 degrees, which actually in combination with the Lorentz factor points to a Doppler boosting effect taking place that can explain why we don't detect any counter jet going in the opposite direction, because this is made too faint to be detected with our sensitivity. Then we infer the jet launching date, actually, which we obtained to be 1 day before the detection of type B QPOs from NICER that were presented by Giraud and Hohmann on Monday, and they were published by Zhang et al., which are classically linked to type B QPOs, to discrete ejecta, but the picture is not clear as Tom outlined before. We can obtain some parameters of the environment of the system. Here, the cavity is assumed to be around half a parsec, which is consistent with other sources which are actually thought to live in cavities, such as XT J5050 and H7043. And also, we obtain a high density jump of around 1000, which implies an internal density of around 10 to minus 3 particle per cubic centimeter. And thanks. And this density appears to be rather low, and it's interesting to actually try to understand how this cavity can be produced by the system. But perhaps the most interesting results concerning the application of this model is the initial energy of this jet, because we infer this jet to have an initial energy of around 10 to 46 ergs, which is a huge value, and depends on two parameters, NISM, the external density, and phi, the opening angle of the jet, which cannot be constrained from this model alone, and for which we have to assume standard values. We assume 1 particle per cubic centimeter and an opening angle of 1 degree, half opening angle of 1 degree from the literature, standard values. And so this implies that we infer a very high energy for this jet, which is way larger than what is commonly obtained for this kind of components. Their energy is usually estimated by looking at the minimum energy required to produce the strong radio flares, which are observed at the moment of ejection, and by assuming equipartition. And actually, we obtain for this jet minimum energies of around 10 to 41, 10 to 42 ergs, while here we are way above. But this is not the first time that such result is obtained for discrete ejecta, because, for example, in a paper by Joe Bright, 2020, for MAXI J1820, they obtain a similar result, meaning that actually the energy content of the jet is way larger than what can be inferred from radiation. And so here we also contribute to the claim, we support the claim that the emission from these jets is not a good tracer of the total energy, which is instead retained not radiated, and is transferred to the surrounding environment as kinetic energy, implying that the feedback of these components is maybe higher than we thought. And if you imagine this energy has to be transferred, has to be provided to the jet from the system in a given time, we can then estimate the total jet power. So if we take into account a bipolar rejection, the total jet power is the QE0 over delta T, where delta T we can roughly estimate it by looking at the rise time of the synchrotron flare at the moment of the jet ejection. And we obtain, not surprisingly, a very high value for the jet power, around 10 to 41 ergs per second, which still depends on the two parameters, NSM and phi, and actually appears to be like, and has to be compared to the simultaneous available accretion power. Thanks, I almost finished. To the simultaneous accretion power, m dot c squared. And we can roughly estimate it by looking at the simultaneous X-ray bolometric luminosity of the system and taking into account an accretion efficiency, a radiative efficiency of the accretion flow around 10%. And it turns out that the jet power that we infer is around 40 times the available accretion power. So here we have a discrepancy because the system is not able to provide that much power to the jet. But perhaps there are ways for which we can actually reconcile this discrepancy. Maybe one option is that we are actually overestimating NSM and phi, and maybe we could provide upper limits on them. Maybe we can compare the jet power with the maximum available accretion power. I almost finished. With the maximum available accretion power, here the 1.4 takes into account the extraction of energy from the rotation of the black hole. For example, if we fix NSM to 1, then we can place an upper limit on phi to be lower than 0.1 degrees, point to an unlikely narrow jets, because in the literature the jets have larger opening angles. Or if we fix phi to 1, then NSM, the external density, has to be below 0.04 particle per cubic centimeter, which is still unlikely since this is external SM density, implying that inside the cavity we have an even lower density. So maybe there are other reasons for this discrepancy. Possibly we are actually underestimating delta T, and the power is the energy is provided to the jet in a longer time scale. Or actually we are underestimating the X-ray bolometric luminosity, which might be higher and at the same time of the jet launching. So we're still looking into that. This is the final part of a work in progress. And that's actually all from me. I'll leave you here with a summary slide. We basically detected discrete ejecta and resolved discrete ejecta in a new black hole. And actually fitting the motion of the jets, we were able to infer many parameters, either of the jet and of the environment in which the system is living. And that's all from me.
Thank you. Let's start with the questions from the room. I see a hand up.
Thanks for the nice talk. So my question may be a bit naive, but how do you connect these two? You have the gap between the observations. So why would you think that this is the same ejecta? What do you?
So
is a different one?
so there are a few things that make us believe that this is the same ejecta. So first is that maybe I can show my slides back. The first thing is the direction of the ejection. So our radio source is appearing in the same direction which the jet was ejected the first time. Then also the timing is important, because if you for example fit a linear with a linear motion, the first part of the motion, which appears to be linear, if you then extrapolate, then our radio source appears exactly where we expect it to be. That's why we think that two ejecta are connected. The two radio sources are connected. Then the flux levels also in radio are also totally consistent. We also see, sorry, what I was pointing to is that exactly if we extrapolate the motion in time, the radio source appears exactly where we expect it to be in the same direction. And also, I can show some backup slides. Sorry. Here we have, yes, here. We have the radio light curve of this ejecta. You see that it is consistent with what we expect. A first phase of adiabatic expansion, which has a quicker decay. Then the jet interacts with the SM, and then this light curve has a slower decay because we have in situ particle reacceleration. That's the line of evidence that make us believe this is the same component. I don't know if my answer is clear.
I see a hand up in Zoom. Asaf, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, please. So basically, you argue that the actual energy in the jet is nearly 5 orders of magnitude more than the energy that is observed in the radio. So the obvious question is, where is this energy? Is there any observations in the optical or any other band?
Basically we don't have observation in other bands, and these jets were directed only radio. Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Yes, I mean, based on the last slide that you gave, you argue that the total energy in the jet, right, is more than 5 times 10 to 46 or so, right? Nearly 5 orders of magnitude more than the energy that is inferred from radio observations.
Yes.
So the obvious question is, where is this energy? It should be a very dark jet. So I was asking whether there is any counterpart in other wavelengths that could be used to put constraints on the energetics of the jet.
Well, one way to put independent constraints on the energy of the jets would be to have a detection in X-rays, for example, with Chandra, of this ejecta, as it has been done in the past for other sources. And with the high resolution of Chandra, maybe you can resolve the ejecta, constrain their size, and so infer the synchrotron energy within the given volume, basically.
Right. Do you
Yes.
have such observations for this jet?
I don't have it for this source. But actually, one of the recent claims is that actually the energy is not radiated, but it's instead retained in the plasma as kinetic energy.
That seems to be at odds with measurements of energy in other sources, isn't it?
For example, in MAXI J1820, there is the same result. Basically, if you look at the synchrotron flare, and if you look at the energy required to produce such flare, is orders of magnitude, at least 2 orders of magnitude below than the energy inferred from another independent size constraint at large scale.
Yeah. Okay, that's 2 orders, not 5 orders.
Yeah, no, this discrepancy is higher. Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay, one final question, yeah.
Hello, this is Andrzej Dziarski. I have a comment that when you estimate the minimum power, you can do it directly, not by first estimating the minimum energy and then dividing by the time, but minimizing the power itself, which I did some years ago for GRS 1915 in the paper by Rabelli and Rodriguez 94. They also claimed that the energy content is huge, and then after correcting for some numbers, we found that it's compatible with the accretion power. So maybe one could look into a different way of calculating the minimum.
Well, of course, this is what we are looking into this currently. So I would be very interested in such a calculation, of course.
Yeah, this was in my 2014 papers.
Thank you. I will look into this for sure.
Okay, sure.
Thanks.
Perfect. Let's thank Francesco again. Great talk and great discussion.